Well, we have to go back and look at where Russia was in February of last year. And at that point, one of the reasons that we grossly underestimated Russia's military potential was that Russia had a very small army. You had perhaps 200,000 Russian soldiers, of which 150,000 or more, 170,000 were professional soldiers. In other words, soldiers that had been enlisted for pay. And the assumption was that this army would not last long, that this army was not motivated, the army was not sufficiently trained and disciplined and so forth. Well, I think those things were erroneous, but what the Russians concluded is that contrary to their expectations, they thought that this smaller force was all they needed for national defense. They got an education in eastern Ukraine that wasn't the case, because they were facing a Ukrainian army that was larger, 450,000 regulars with another 200,000+ reservists. And they decided that we were going to back that Ukrainian force come hell or high water, as they put it. And that's why you had a dramatic change in Russia. So within a few months in the summer, the decision was made. We've got to mobilize more forces. We've got to expand the armed forces. Today, we've got about 740,000 troops in and around the theater that we call the Ukrainian War Theater. Of that, perhaps 550,000 are sitting in Belarus and down in southern Ukraine and in western Russia, ready to involve themselves, let's put it that way, invade, intervene, use whatever terminology you want. And they now have infinitely more modern, newer equipment than they did previously. They now have over 1,500 brand new tanks, more than 2,000 artillery systems, rocket artillery, missile systems. The truth of the matter is that what we have done is effectively expand, modernize, and professionalize the Russian army, creating something that did not previously exist. And by the way, it's not going to go away now.
Let me run for you a clip from our CIA friend, who, of course, makes the opposite argument. So just to set the stage for the clip, he was boasting about how weak the Russian military was in Afghanistan. That's how the clip starts. And then eventually, it's about 45, 50 seconds. Eventually, he comes around to his views of where the Russian military is today, decidedly different from yours. Jack Devine. Nobody knows Afghanistan the way you do, Jack, but that was the death throes of the Soviet Union. That was not Putin with a modern army.
Well, first of all, I dispute he has a modern army. He's now demonstrating to the world he doesn't have a modern army. He has a lot of modern weapons. But
he has a more modern army now than Gorbachev had in the Afghan days.
Yeah, but look at what Afghanis had, AK-47s. Look at what technology has done for the Ukrainians and all the sophisticated technology from drones to cyber intelligence. His army is not showing itself very well. It's a surprise to all of us, although this is the second time I've been surprised. Because when I went in to do the Afghan program, I was assured they were 10 feet tall, and then every day they shrunk a quarter of an inch. So I think what's showing here, and I think it's the big story, he has paramilitary functioning as his cutting edge because his own army. Now they're fighting. Remember, Judge, you and I talked about dissent and how the things crumble when you start to lose. Watch the dynamic between the Wagner group and the military.
All right, when he says paramilitary, he must mean Wagner. And before we get into whether Putin's political stability is crumbling, which it doesn't seem like it is at all, please assess what he said about the Russian military.
Well, obviously, I think he's wrong, dead wrong. I think this Russian army is infinitely better than what they had back in the 1980s, and certainly better than what we saw in the 70s. I don't want to waste too much time going back over the Afghan.
No. There's no reason going.
Older gentlemen from 40 to 60 that just are not up to the task. So I think he's dead wrong on all of that.
But I think the Wagner group is interesting because people don't really understand what it is. It is a Russian national formation. It was formed for different kinds of reasons originally.
Let me just stop you. Is this what you think he's referring to when he says paramilitary?
Yes, okay. And he doesn't know what he's talking about because there's nothing paramilitary about the Wagner organization. They have tanks, they have artillery, they are equipped just as well as the Russian army, in fact, with cutting-edge capabilities, drones, and so forth. So I think he's sitting around thinking about Wagner as it may have been a year ago, when it was really much smaller and designed for military assistance and advisory work. Much like our own military assistance and advisory brigades, which are small and very light. The Wagner organization now is brilliantly organized and equipped, and it's being very effectively led on the ground. This bickering between Wagner and his famous leader Prigozhin, who likes the cameras, he's sort of a bella figura. He wants to be in front of the cameras all the time and advertise himself. Putin is kind of...
Ours. The Russian missiles have been a barrage all over Ukraine. You pointed out that Ukraine's air defenses failed to shoot down a single missile. You pointed out that the Patriot batteries, which we've given them, will not help against the cruise missiles. How devastating has this been in the past 24 or 36 hours on the ground in Ukraine? Well, I think you should put that map up. Everyone, military and civilian, of energy wherever they possibly could. That seems to have worked. Now they know from experience that the Ukrainians will double down and try to repair the damage as much as possible. But the damage now is really horrific. It's beyond their ability to rapidly repair. Gary, can you put the map up again? Colonel, if you're sitting in the...
Macgregor, but if you're part of the group that's doing what President Biden wants him to do, and you see a map like this, what do you say? What do you do? What do you advise? I mean, this is devastating. There's barely a section of the country that they haven't hit. Well, I think you...
Judge, because we're in the mud. No follow-up by whom? By Russian troops moving into the areas that were devastated by the missiles? No, they're not because of the mud. And I've sent you some videos of the mud. It's legendary. Remember, you've got 10 to 15 feet of black earth soil. You drive a tank or a truck, anything off-road, off an asphalt road, any paved road, you risk sinking 5 to 10 feet into the muck, right? I want to show you a picture from a drone of the devastation of a small village. This was taken this morning. It's a small Russian town called Zashjiv. I don't know where it is. It sort of shows the indiscriminate destruction of this village. I don't know if civilians have been killed. Just an example of what the missiles that the Ukrainians can't shoot down are doing. Let's stop here for a second. First of all, this is near Layoff, which is the far western side of Ukraine. Targeteers? These are people that study the maps, look at the photographs, and then certify the targets. Those targets are then transmitted to the various batteries and then fired. We haven't had any role in any of that. We don't know what happened. Sometimes those targets are not valid. Sometimes someone mistakes a building for something it isn't, or it's being reported that something moved into the building that isn't there anymore. That happened to us all the time during the Kosovo campaign. We struck things only to find out we didn't hit anything. Now, I'm not suggesting that this time with the Russians in Ukraine. I think they've got a better grip than we did in Kosovo. And why not? They've lived there with these people for hundreds of years. They know where things are. It's not a mystery. But the bottom line is, we don't know what was there to begin with. They have tried to focus primarily on energy. They're trying to bring the state to the Patriot battery. And the Patriot was really designed to shoot down theater ballistic missiles. Now, those exist. The Russians do have theater ballistic missiles, and they could be used to protect against those. But they're not really designed to deal with drones. They can shoot down aircraft, but again, if the aircraft launches from a great distance, a set of cruise missiles, they may be able to shoot 1 or 2 or 3 down. But every time you shoot or engage with the Patriot, you're shooting 2 of your missiles. Now, if there are 50 or 60 targets, do the math. You've just expended 120 missiles. Well, where are you going to get more missiles? Correct. How rapidly are they going to show up? Correct. And you know, this is problematic. We've trained 90 Ukrainian soldiers to operate the Patriot system, but I can guarantee you there will be contractors there from the West. Americans, Polish, German, in whatever uniforms or civilian clothes, to supervise this because it's just too complex after a few weeks of training to... Training Ukrainian fighter pilots in the US to fly F-16S? How dangerous is that? There are 30 to 35,000 Ukrainians training in Germany, the Czech Republic, Great Britain, the United States, Canada. They're all over the place being trained in various ways. All of these people have to come back at some point and then plug back into the force. As far as the F-16S are concerned, I would not expect much from any pilot with only a few weeks or a few months training, and I don't think we do. My concern is that if that happens, if we actually provide those F-16S, we may end up doing something the Russians did during the Korean War, and that was that they actually sent their pilots in MiGs to face us because the Koreans could not learn how to do it quickly enough. You mean that Russian pilots might be shooting down Ukrainian pilots or American pilots in F-16S? Well, if you're a Russian pilot and you see an enemy aircraft, Or you are a Russian air defense battery and you have enemy aircraft, you shoot it down. It doesn't matter who's flying the thing. And that's what we did during the Korean War. We had some examples of that during the Vietnam War. It's very straightforward. You just can't train enough of the indigenous population to operate these things.